Okay, so while we get settled, please make sure that you have a copy of the standards in front of you, either from your email or there are versions in the chat. And while we wait for a few more people to join us, we're expecting a full house today. While we're waiting for more people to join us, you can enter an answer here in the chat. We're getting metaphorical. Think back on your past academic year and which of these candies, this is the time of day where I need candy, which of these describes your feeling about the past academic year? So could your year be described by, say, exploding sour worms? Or could it be described by lifesavers? Or could it be described by almond joy? Or if you have another idea that you want to select, please add that to the chat. And you don't have to explain, but if you would like to. I'm glad I don't see a lot of people with exploding sour worms, though I can relate. Oh, congrats on your first year as adjunct faculty and professor. That's a big deal. Sour Patch Kids. I think my children's teachers are saying the same thing at this point. Okay, I want to give just a few more people a chance to join. We are expecting a little bit more than this. All right, thank you all for participating again. Please make sure you have the standards in front of you. I put the Excel file in as well as a PDF into the chat. These also came to you in an email sometime in the past week. So welcome. This is the team, Educator Standards and Testing, or Standards and Certification. My name is Beth Burkhart. I'm the Director of Educator Standards and Testing, and I'm joined by my team here. So we've got DeMarco, Jennifer, Elsa, Kelly, and Kay joining us today. So I know you've had the chance to work with some of them over your course, and they are a small but very wonderful team. So they will be here to answer some questions in the chat and provide tech assistance should you need it. Couple of things to remind you of. We are recording. So if you have colleagues that couldn't make it and they want to see this later on, it'll be posted on the program provider webpage in about 2 weeks is what the process usually takes. Please, for that purpose, ensure you are on mute. We've got quite a crowd today. And we do have a lot of opportunities for you to provide your thoughts, your questions, and feedback. I am going to ask, though, just because of the large group that we have, that we use the chat to submit general meeting type of questions. And any questions related to the standards themselves or the implementation processes, I have a Padlet that we're going to use. And that's just so I don't lose any of these good questions in the chat. So I want to keep those questions all in the Padlet to be introduced later. Here we are at later. So we have a Padlet. DeMarco is going to share the link to this Padlet in the chat. There it is. So please click on that. Make sure it works for you. I'm a little new to the world of Padlets, so hopefully it does. And you will notice that the Padlet is divided into different sections. So we have general information, timelines, implementation, any of those kinds of questions would go in that first section. And then we have sections dedicated to the standards themselves. When we held a standards webinar back in January for programs, we heard feedback that we would really like time to read and respond to the standards. And so we've built in a lot of time to do that today. And we'd be collecting your responses on this Padlet. There's also a survey at the end of the webinar for you to submit additional questions if there's something you didn't think about to put on the Padlet. To add to it, all you do is click on the plus sign underneath that section and you type in your response. You click publish, I believe it says, and that will add your response to the Padlet. So again, general questions, meeting, Zoom type of questions, please add to the chat unless we have an activity where you do add stuff to the chat. Otherwise, please use the Padlet. We're going to use this to build our FAQ. Okay, I sent these out in the email, but our meeting objectives today are to really take a deep dive and closer look at these standards. So we'll start with understanding general information, the context and the timelines around these revised set of standards. Understand some of the key shifts. So there were shifts both structural and conceptual made. So really just understanding what those look like and where you can see them laid out in the standards. Familiarize you all with the resources and the supports that we've planned for programs to adapt to these new standards. And then we will spend the bulk of our time reviewing, asking questions, and hearing your responses to these revised group of standards. Look at that, right on time, ending the meeting overview at 3:10. So now we're going to get into general information and context. We'll review the major shifts. We'll review the resources and the planned learning series. And then we will spend the bulk of our time reviewing the standards. And then at the end, a couple reminders, a closing, and a survey, another chance for you all to provide feedback.
Hey Beth, before jumping into the meat of the presentation, we can't edit the Padlet just yet. I think there's another setting feature for you to click on.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Let me pause for just a moment, everyone, because I do want to make sure that you can see that. Okay. If you refresh, it should be working now. Does it work?
Where go?
Woo! Okay, thank you all for your patience with me. And as I adjust to Padlet, I appreciate you all. All right. Now, did I stop sharing my screen?
Yes.
Ah, there we go. It's throwing off my timing. Okay, here we go. So to ground us in this work, we're going to start with a question, and this actually will be a spot where I ask you all to respond in the chat. These are questions that we asked our development team, so the folks who worked on these standards before they got to the work. And I think it really helped guide their thinking along the impact of what these standards can do. In the interest of time, I'm not going to ask you to answer all of the parts of this question. But in the chat, pick one of these audiences and respond with, what is the purpose of having educator standards? All states have them, but why do we have them? Why did we spend this time developing them? And the purpose could look different for district school leaders. It could look different for teachers. It could look different for programs or for students and families. But yeah, why would we have them? What's the purpose? Commonality and calibration, to ensure students are receiving what they need. Program quality, a guide for teachers to do their work in common language. Align expectations. Oh, they're coming in fast and furious. Quality teachers, a compass, accountability, alignment to guide curriculum for clarity, student success. I feel like this would have been a good one for a word cloud, but that probably would have come with its own technical assistance problems for me. These are wonderful. Keep them coming. Commonality across the state. Yeah, you know, the word standard, it's right there, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you for engaging in this question. And what we're seeing, and when we asked this question with the Standards Development Committee, you know, they came out to just really the conclusion that the standards impact so much in education across the state. They have the ability to just really touch everything that is related to education in the state because it's starting with your pre-service teachers. So that important role of making pre-service teachers understand what it is they need to do that's most important in the classroom on day one. The second question we asked was if all teachers were prepared and evaluated on high standards for teacher excellence, what could be the results? And you don't need to answer this in the chat, but just something to think about. You know, if this were if we had these high standards and all teachers prepared and evaluated and met that standard, what does that look like? So as we move on, I want to just take a quick pause for a moment of celebration and appreciation for the people who worked on these standards and the time and the thought that they put into them. You know, as part of this role, I had to research educator standards in a lot of different states. And I know Texas usually likes to be humble about its accomplishments and doesn't like to brag about it being so great. But this is one place where I think we can really brag because these standards have so much time, effort, thought put into them, and really were developed by Texas educators. So we're just very proud of the work. They received great feedback from the field, went through a long rulemaking process to really get these right. So just pausing for appreciation for everyone who worked on those. Now we're going to do an overview of them, and this might be a repeat of some of the information you saw back in January. But I think it helps because we also want to recognize that while these standards do reflect a lot of thoughtfulness and care and work, it's a change, and change can come with challenge. And so we want to recognize that and work through these questions to help build understanding and to help figure out where we can best support. So we will talk about these questions, why the standards were revised, who is on the team, when are candidates going to be evaluated on the standards, what are the big revisions, and then how is TEA planning to support implementation? Let me grab a cup of tea. So the teacher pedagogy standards changed with the primary driver of three pieces of legislation. This is around House Bill 1605, which sets training requirements in the proficient use of open education resource materials. House Bill 159, which outlines training requirements for teachers, pre-service teachers to educate all students, including students with disabilities and emergent bilingual students, and understanding the best practices in digital literacy and virtual instruction, which comes out of Senate Bill 226. So those of you familiar with more Texas Administrative Code, you'll know that these training requirements are in the revised Chapter 228. And what the standards do is specify and clarify what that actually would look like in a preparation program. So what are these specific skills related to the use of OER, open education resource materials, related to what are the specific skills that teachers need for educating all students. So those are called out clearly in the standards. The standards revision also gave an opportunity to set unified expectations for all classroom teachers. Before the standards were grade banded, so we had early childhood, elementary, middle school, secondary. This really dove into what are the essential skills for all teachers to know. If you're in a classroom with students, what are the things that you need to know and be able to do to serve your students best? So the committee looked into what are the best practices in preparation, in assessment and delivery. How do you use specific skills to build an effective learning environment? How do you get to know your students in a way that helps you build their learning? So knowing them as learners, knowing them as individuals, knowing them as people in a way that helps motivate them. And then it includes rigorous expectations for teachers to know their content, for teachers to be professional, and for teachers to address their continuing improvement as a professional educator. And then finally, something we've heard for a while with our certification tests is how do we include professional expectations for teachers in a real way? And so these standards include expectations for teachers to model ethical behavior, to engage in continuous improvement, to interact as members of the community and with stakeholders, and then it identifies clearly what the district's role is and what the teacher's role is in things like setting policy and selecting instructional materials. So the team who participated in the development of the standards was selected, or not selected, but approved by the State Board of Educator Certification. It was very popular. We had 168 applications for just 45 positions, so it was a rigorous application process. And we selected positions for development of math pedagogy, English language arts and reading pedagogy, and general pedagogy. And we wanted the whole state to be represented. And so we were able to select members from 15 different regions across the state. They came from LEAs and charters. We had representation from IHEs, from alternative certification programs, from ESCs, nonprofits, and teacher orgs. So we had a good representation across the state and across different fields in education working on these standards. This group was tasked with this collaborative process of taking what was in legislation and turning it into language in the standards that was actionable, that could be seen in a classroom, that could be taught in a preparation program. This also went through a long process of feedback from stakeholders and feedback from the board. And then in April, these standards went before the State Board of Education, who took no action on it. So as of yesterday, the standards are now effective. A big question is, how do these standards connect to observation and evaluation? And when will they be fully implemented? Because that takes time, right? There's an adjustment period. So first of all, I think if we look back to the initial question that you all answered about the impact of standards, if we look at how these standards align across a teacher's career, we have teacher candidates receiving preparation, and that is based on these standards, the standards in Chapter 235. You'll also see that there's a Chapter 149 here, and those are for practicing teachers. Those standards are not subject to SBEC rulemaking or SBOE rulemaking. They go through a different process, and those are practicing teacher standards that are used to inform the T-TESS evaluation system. The good news is that these standards now match. So the 149 standards were revised to match the changes in the revised 235 pedagogy standards. So pre-service teachers and practicing teachers are still held to the same expectation. And there's the T-TESS team right now currently going through a refreshed T-TESS rubric, which will be aligned to these standards as well. So what we'll have is all folks in education really reading from the same book. So we have prospective teachers receiving their preparation on the Chapter 235 standards, which match the 149. They also are evaluated and receive feedback on T-TESS in some programs, and field supervisors receive T-TESS certification. Then certification exams. Teachers receive certification through the aligned certification exams. We're in the process of developing, this could be a whole other webinar. We're in the process of developing the teacher performance assessment for Texas, which is going to be based on these standards. And then leaders and appraisers receive T-TESS certification. Going into the classroom, T-TESS and 149 are the standards that are used to evaluate professional growth and to give feedback to teachers. And even high-performing teachers, veteran teachers, are still refining the skills that they learned from these 235 standards. So the standards can inform your work as a teacher throughout your career. And these things are intentionally made to fit together. So we get to the question of when. When is all this stuff taking place? If we look to the left, the standards development started in 2023, and as noted, went through rulemaking and took no action from SBOE in April. And as of yesterday, the standards became effective. We are now entering in standards the EPP capacity building phase, where EPPs are going to adjust their curriculum and make sure that they are meeting the standards. We are providing support as much as we can or as little as we can, depending on what the needs of programs are that you tell us. So from now, for the next 2 years, we'll be working on building capacity around these standards and making sure you all have what you need for them. Meanwhile, we are also developing the Texas Test of Educator Proficiency. This is the performance certification exam that will be aligned with these standards. That launches in September of 2027 for a 2-year introductory period. And so that introductory period is still a ramp-up time where a completed portfolio or the completed assessment is equivalent to passing the assessment. So there's a long ramp-up period from now to when, after 2029, when that introductory period is over. Also, the T-TESS refresh, as I spoke about earlier, is still going on. And they are planning to pilot in fall of 2026. So the pilot will be with a smaller group, and then the launch of the refresh T-TESS is at the same time as the launch of our certification exam. So again, intentionally layering these things and giving as generous a runway as we can to onboard and implement these standards. Okay, now that the logistics have been addressed, we can get into some of the big changes to look for in the standards. First, looking at the structural revisions. Now, if you looked at the former 235 standards, first of all, they were grade banded. Now they are EC through 12. And the former standards included 6 different standards. So planning and delivery, knowledge of students, content knowledge, learning environment, data-driven practices, and professional practices and responsibilities. The revised standards have been moved down to 5 standards. Instructional preparation is its own standard now. It's a standalone. That's because of the new focus on the open education resource materials, practices around lesson internalization, and practices involving science of learning to use that to prepare for instruction. So instructional preparation stands alone as its own standard. We combined instructional delivery and assessment, and that's because the committee felt that they went together well as far as using formative assessment throughout instructional delivery. So because those paired so well, they integrated those into one standard. You'll see that content pedagogy knowledge and skills is still its own standard, but when you get into the actual language of the standards themselves, there are content-specific standards for math and content-specific standards for reading language arts. I know there'll be some questions about how folks are tested on that, but in general, I can tell you that the certificate that the candidate is pursuing aligns with what standards they're held for. So if you're not being certified in math, you're not going to be held accountable for the math content pedagogy standards. Learning environment stayed largely the same. And then professional practices and responsibilities remains its own standard and gets built out just a bit. In terms of the content, I've mentioned a few of these already just in talking about the context of the standard, but some things that you'll notice. These new standards integrate knowledge and use of the
Is it ready?
open education resource materials.
Soon?
Oh, there's too many. Another key change that you'll see is they differentiate lesson design from lesson internalization and delivery. You'll notice that there are expectations for teachers to know the cognitive science of learning, and then reinforcing knowledge and skills for educating all students, including students with disabilities. We're getting closer to where we will start reviewing the standards. But first, I want to share a couple of resources with you. Warning ahead of time, this is going to require me doing some screen sharing acrobatics. Hopefully it all goes smoothly. So the first thing I wanted to share with you, and we will put this link in the chat for everyone, we've stood up a website for some resources for programs. And I'm going to share that with you. Can you see the screen with the website on it?
Yes.
Alexa, stop the timer, please.
Okay. Just do please make sure that you are on mute. Okay, and I will give you just a quick tour of the resources here. The Classroom Teacher Pedagogy Standards. So these are the versions of the standards that I shared with you all in email or at the beginning of this meeting. There's also an alignment chart. No one's required to complete this alignment chart. This is really just if in case programs want to use this. It looks like alignment charts that you may have filled out for other purposes. It's not required. We're not collecting it, but I just want to make sure that you have access to it if your program likes doing this, this alignment chart. Some of the content that I mentioned before, we've also added some resources here, and we'll continue to add them as we develop them. So science of learning resources, there's a new content section in the standards around using the science of learning to plan and deliver instruction. And so there's a couple of 1-pagers and 2-pagers here that can be informative for programs. So it's really a basic overview of them, but can help you get started with what those concepts are. There are links to resources for the open education instructional materials. So there is a link here for accessing the Bluebonnet OER materials, and then the IMRA instructional materials review and approval processes and rubrics. If you are curious about those, that's an easy way for you to get to them. Additionally, we mentioned the supports around and the standards around educating all students. So these are links to websites that the TEA is using. So when you get to language in the standards around things like multiple means of engagement, multiple means of, well, anything multiple means, you'll notice that you'll find resources here to help you with those. And we will continue to add to those, but please do yourself a favor right now and just bookmark this page so that you have it, send it to your friends. This is where we will put as many resources as we can for EPPs. The other support that we're planning is a program learning series where we take deep dives into the concepts from the standards. And this will not be me talking to you about concepts for standards. We'll invite expert testimony from people and programs who have already done some of this integration of concepts into their programs. It's also an opportunity to hear from people who've done this work and to share ideas with other programs. Our rough scope and sequence for it right now is that starting in June, we will dive into science of learning concepts. Arby's, not the restaurant. Hopefully, it is, you know that it is now the research-based instructional strategies. So please don't come wanting a roast beef sandwich. I won't have them. And then in winter, we will move on to HQIM and lesson internalization. So I will send out a full schedule of these and dates. Just be on the lookout for those in the EPP newsletter. I did reach out to some programs who've already done some of this work integrating either science of learning concepts or OER materials in. And I just asked them for some good general advice as we're getting started, just recognizing that it's a change and change comes with some challenges. It's just what I thought was good general advice from programs who've done the work. This one in particular said, just start small and strategically select early adopters. So the programs who've integrated some of this work, started with a few key faculty who were early adopters, open to new things and trying some stuff out, and then have a plan for how to scale it up. And then with this content, I think they were speaking specifically of the science of learning, is trying to understand what the content looks like for your candidates in their coursework, and then what it looks like when you're teaching your candidates to their coursework. So programs I've spoken to just really got into this idea of modeling the practices for your candidates as another way to effectively integrate these. So just some solid advice from other programs. All right, we are now at the reviewing the standards part. So we might actually have you out before 5 o'clock. I didn't know how long that part was going to take me officially. So we're going to go through a little bit of just general information before we get into the standards review, and then we'll have time to read the standards independently and respond using the Padlet. So a quick orientation to the standards document. If you're working on the Excel doc, I should say, not the PDF. So if you look down at the bottom here, they're divided into the sections. So the definition section is one tab, and then each of the standards is divided into its own tab. You'll have the main standard here and then the sub-standards underneath. So you'll see the groups of the standards are delineated by color here. Also, these documents, these Excel documents, the standards themselves and the definitions, those are locked, but I don't know, this is kind of a handy tool. So I left all of the columns B, C, D, and beyond open for you to edit. So if you wanted to, if it helped to use this for an alignment chart or any of your program materials, I think you're able to edit parts of this document so that you're able to use it for your programs. Okay, revisiting the Padlet, make sure you have access to it. Again, just a quick reminder on use of the Padlet. We're going to look first at the instructional preparation standards. So please do use the Padlet to submit questions. These questions will be used to build an FAQ that will be used as a support for all programs. So please, no questions too small. Do ask as many questions as you think of, and we'll put them together into an FAQ doc for everyone. So a quick orientation to what the standards look like. It's basically like reading the TEKS. We'll have one standard summary statement for each of them. And this previews everything that's going to be in that standard. So for instructional preparation, this is where you address how students learn and how you prepare for delivery. It includes lesson design, evaluating materials, using knowledge of students, and then using a process of lesson internalization. And you'll see detailed standards related to each of those concepts within this standard. The standard themselves, you'll have one. So this is the first standard under instructional preparation. And this is the one relating to the science of learning concepts. We don't need to read all this together. You're going to have a chance to do that in a moment. But I wanted to just point out a couple of things. The standards read almost chronologically. They don't have to, but they do. And I think that just made more sense to the folks who are working on the revisions that it followed this logical order. Another thing I wanted to point out that's similar to the TEKS is the use of the words such as. So these are suggestions. It is, including but not limited to is how we can read the such as statements. So using these strategies such as multimedia learning principles, reduction of extraneous cognitive load, worked examples, interleaving. So all of these are important concepts to science of learning, but it might not be the entire universe of those practices. So just wanted to call that out. Before we review each of the standards, I'm just going to notice a couple of things that you all can look for when you review. Instructional preparation, you will see standards related to science of learning. You will see standards related to lesson design, use of high quality instructional materials and lesson internalization, and then how planning for accessibility is involved in a teacher's preparation for teaching. The protocol that we will use is we will take 7 minutes independently and off camera and silent to independently review this instructional preparation standard and add any of your questions to the Padlet. When we finish, we'll come back as a whole group and have a brief, hear your responses and your reactions before we move on to the next standard. So with that, it is 3:40, which makes the math nice and easy. We're going to spend 7 minutes off camera, independently reviewing the instructional preparation standard. Submit any of your questions to the Padlet. And I think we can all get started. All right, I'll see you all at 3:48. I'll see you at 3:48. Okay. All right. Hopefully that gave you some time to read through instructional preparation standards and saw a lot of great questions coming through in the Padlet. So thank you for submitting those. We will follow up with an FAQ that answers those questions. So really appreciate it. In the meantime, though, any initial thoughts that you have about the standards in this group in instructional preparation? Just more general thoughts about them rather than specific about the standards, or like about specific standards, or they could be about specific standards. But if you have any general thoughts that you wanted to share, just please do add them to the chat. Yes, thank you, Kara. And I think that's something I forgot to mention when I was talking about the structural changes. So knowledge of students is no longer its own standalone standard. And the reason for that is when the committee was doing the revisions, they realized that knowledge of students is important to delivery, it's important to planning, it's important to learning environment, to professional practices, and to how you're delivering content. So instructional, rather than knowledge of students be its own category, it's embedded throughout each of the standards. All right, thank you so much for your feedback. Continue to add it. And just enjoy hearing. So the rollout date, the standards are effective as of yesterday. The first assessment that's based on the standards won't be launched until 2027, so September 1, 2027. All right. And I'm seeing just a few questions in the chat kind of about specific definitions. Please do add those to the Padlet too, so I don't lose them and they make their way into the FAQs. Guaranteed, if you are asking that question, someone else is also asking. So please do add it to the Padlet so we're able to respond in an FAQ. Okay, we are going to continue on with the review of instructional delivery and assessment. So this is in group 2, or the second tab under instructional delivery and assessment. And things you will look for here that you'll see are the science of learning concepts. You'll see more specific language around formative assessment, student work analysis and feedback. You'll see language around research-based instructional strategies, and then you'll see practices relating to accessibility and educating all students. We will undergo the same protocol that we did before. Was 7 minutes enough time, or you can just put in the chat if you would appreciate a little bit more time? Plenty of time? Okay. That's good to hear. 5 minutes would be even better. Okay. We'll split the difference for 6 minutes. How's that? Because I know I'm a slower reader than other people, and I always appreciate the time. All right. So we'll take 6 minutes off camera, putting us back here at 3:58. Again, review the standards, add questions to the Padlet. If you need more time, please just feel free to say in the chat that you need more time. We've got plenty. Okay, we're going to go off camera, and I will see you all in, 3:59. I keep talking. All right, I'll see you in a bit. All right, we'll bring it back for a pause in between instructional delivery and assessment and the next group of standards. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please do add them in the chat. Just also because I'm seeing some comments around lesson design and OER materials, I think another place to point you is in standard B3. And that is the standard on lesson design. And there's language that was built in specifically for content and grade levels where OER materials are not available or HQIM is not available. So this is the standard that still specifies practices around lesson design. And it does call out those content areas. So we definitely have heard that, we know there's not high quality instructional materials or HQIM available for all grade levels and contents at this time. Okay, any other reflections on instructional delivery and assessment standards? All right, well, if you have them, please keep them coming in the chat. Or, please add them to the Padlet and we can respond with the FAQ. We will then move on to looking at content pedagogy knowledge and skills. So this is the last kind of like big standard. It takes a little bit more time to read. And so you'll see the first two standards are related to more universal general content pedagogy. And then there's content pedagogy for math, and there's content pedagogy for reading language arts. So you'll notice those at the end of these standards. So please do take a few minutes. And again, those content specific pedagogy standards, those were drafted because those are the content areas where there is open education resource material available. So one reason behind the drafting of that is because OER was available there. And again, those standards will relate to someone's certification. So if you're not being certified in math, you're not going to be evaluated on the math content pedagogy standards. So you will see in these standards the continuation of science of learning concepts and practices. You will see universal content pedagogy, content-specific pedagogy, and again, accessibility for educating all students is built into these standards. We'll take another 6 minutes. That seemed to be an appropriate amount of time. And again, please add your questions and responses to the Padlet. All right, I will see you at 4:08. Okay, coming back for a quick pause in between these two groups of standards. But please, if you have any just overall thoughts, I've been enjoying reading your comments and questions in the Padlet. If you have additional thoughts that you want to share with the group, please add them to the chat. I hope you're all hanging in here. It's a lot of reviewing and reading. But we are going to move to the next group. This is a shorter group of standards. And this has to do with the learning environment. So you'll notice some key differences from this learning environment to the last, but some of these standards did stay largely the same. You will see, again, references to science of learning. You'll see more specific callouts to classroom management systems, routines, and procedures. You'll additionally see a focus on student self-regulation. And a consistent thread through the standards is accessibility and educating all students. Carla, to your question about the Padlet, it's going to be, it depends on how many questions we have and how much research they require, but I would hope to get them out in the next couple of weeks when I post this webinar. And I'll continue to add to it throughout. All right, learning environment does not require as much time, so I am going to say about 4 minutes should be plenty. Please do add to the chat if you're going to need more time than that. I'm happy to give it to you. But we will go through the same process with reviewing the learning environment standards, and I will see you at 4:14. All right. We've made it to almost the last one. The professional practices and responsibilities standard is coming up next. Thank you for your continued participation, your comments on the Padlet, your questions. It's a challenge for me to not try to answer them all right away, but I wouldn't be able to answer all of them. So I will get working on them shortly. I can, yes, I will. I'm seeing just a couple of questions come up in the chat, but I'm gonna keep moving. And I can circle back to some of the bigger changes in the standards too, just per some of these questions. Okay. So when we get into professional practices and responsibilities, these saw maybe like they were still revised, but maybe not as much. But you will still see some new call outs here. So you'll see some attention drawn to continuous improvement. You will see more collaboration with professionals, families, and communities, and specific language about the teacher's role in that. You will see attention to understanding the laws and the code of ethics, and then continuing thread of accessibility and educating all students. So we will take about 5 minutes on these. Should take just about that much, and then submit your questions and your responses to the Padlet, and then we will come back to close out the meeting. So I'll see you at 4:21. All right, everyone, you made it. Any responses you have to this, please do add. I am going to keep the Padlet open through the end of this week. So if you think of further questions, please do add them if that's another site you want to bookmark so you're able to add those questions.